Get in the back seat and stay down, my son's best friend said. His voice so low, I almost didn't hear him over the sound of the morning birds. I stood there on my front porch in my good navy blazer, the one I'd bought at the bay specifically for this day, holding a coffee I hadn't taken a single sip from. It was 7:43 in the morning. My son was getting married in 4 hours. I beg your pardon? Please. He looked over his shoulder at the street, then back at me. His name was Finn. Finn Calloway. No, wait, that last name's taken. Finn Alderton. He'd known my son since they were 11 years old, since that first week of junior hockey in Barrie, when my son had forgotten his water bottle, and Finn had wordlessly handed over half of his. I had known this boy for 22 years. I had fed him Thanksgiving dinner more times than I could count, and right now he looked genuinely frightened. Finn, what is going on? I can't explain here. Please, just trust me. Get in the back, lie flat, and don't say a word until I tell you. He swallowed. I'm sorry, I know how this looks, but you need to see something before the ceremony. You need to see it yourself. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I got in the car. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was 22 years of trust. Not panic exactly, but that particular kind of stillness that comes over people when they've already made a decision they know is going to hurt someone they love. I lay down across the back seat, my blazer creasing, my coffee sitting abandoned on my porch railing, and I told myself that whatever happened next, I had raised my son to pick good people. And Finn was a good person. The drive was maybe 8 minutes. I know that part of town. It's the area where my daughter-in-law, well, where she used to live, before she moved in with my son last spring. Nice enough street. Mature trees. One of those neighborhoods where everybody puts Christmas lights up the same week and snow blows each other's walks without being asked. Finn parked and said nothing. Can I sit up now? Not yet. I stayed down. I could hear him shift in the driver's seat. The engine was off. A dog barked somewhere, then stopped. I stared at the upholstered ceiling of Finn's old Civic and tried to breathe slowly, the way my doctor keeps telling me to. Then I heard a door open. Not our car door, a house door. Stay down, Finn said, barely a whisper. I turned my head just slightly, and through the gap between the seat and the door, through that thin strip of window, I saw her, my son's fiancée. She was standing on the front porch of a house I didn't recognize. Her hair was loose, which struck me as odd because she'd told me she was going to the salon that morning, had told my son and me both over dinner 2 weeks ago. I have the appointment at 8, so I won't see you until the church. She was in a robe. A man's robe, it looked like, pale gray, too long in the sleeves, and there was a man in the doorway behind her, not in a formal way. Not like a roommate, not like a cousin, not like anyone with an innocent explanation. He was leaning against the frame with the ease of someone who belonged there. He was holding 2 mugs. He handed her one. She took it. He said something, she laughed, and then he kissed her. Not a peck, not a friendly nothing. He put his hand on the side of her face and she leaned into him, and the coffee mug was still in her other hand, and it was 7:51 in the morning, and my son was at this moment probably standing in his bathroom tying his tie for the 3rd time, because he always ties it 3 times before he's satisfied. I don't remember deciding to stay down. I just stayed down, and the world went very quiet. Finn drove us away after another minute or so. He didn't speak. I didn't ask him to. We got to the end of the street and turned, and I finally sat up, slowly, and looked out at the perfectly ordinary Saturday morning. A man walking a retriever, a kid on a bike, a Tim Hortons cup rolling in a gutter, and tried to understand what I had just seen. How long have you known? I asked. 3 weeks, he said. I'm sorry. I wanted to be sure before I said anything, and then I didn't know how to. He stopped. Started again. I found out by accident. I was dropping something off for your son at her old place, and she answered the door and he was there. She told me it was her cousin. But I've met her cousin, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. He exhaled. Last week I parked down the street 2 different mornings. He's there a lot. Is that his house? I think so. I looked up the address. It's registered to a man named, and this is the part that made me call you last night instead of sleeping. It's registered to her husband. I turned to look at him. She's married, he said. Legally married. I found the registration through a public records search. I know someone who does that kind of work. The marriage was registered 6 years ago in Ontario. There's been no divorce filed. She's been using her maiden name with your son. He has no idea. I sat with that for the rest of the drive. I should tell you something about my son, so you understand what this meant. He is not naive. He is not young. He turned 41 in February, and he has had his heart broken before. A long engagement in his 30s that ended badly. A few years of being very careful after that. He came to me about 18 months ago and told me he'd met someone. He sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and looked the way he used to look when he was 8 years old and proud of something he'd made. A little shy, a little glowing, and he said, "Mum, I think she's it." I had met her. We'd had Sunday dinners, a few holidays, a shopping trip where she was charming and easy, and asked me questions about myself that seemed genuine. I hadn't had any particular alarm bells. I'd had the mild, low-level wariness I feel about all new people, which I know is not a virtue. I'd told myself to be open. I'd tried. But I had lost her husband 3 years before. A cardiac event in the driveway, a Tuesday in November, and I had been learning ever since what it means to still have love that belongs to someone and no one to give it to. My son getting married. It had meant something to me that I'm not entirely able to put into words. It had felt like proof that the good things still come. That we're not. Stunned. And now I was sitting in the passenger seat of a Civic on the morning of his wedding, holding the information that his fiancée had a legal husband she had never mentioned. I was 63 years old, in my good navy blazer, and my coffee was going cold on my front porch railing, and I had to decide what to do. "Does she know you know?" I asked Finn. "No. Does anyone else know?" "Just us." I nodded. I watched the streets of Barrie go past. A hardware store, a church that wasn't ours, an elementary school with a hand-painted banner that said, "Congratulations, graduates." "What time does the ceremony start?" "Noon." "Take me home first. I need to make a phone call." The call I needed to make was not to my son. Not yet. It was to my friend Vivienne. Not that Vivienne, this was a different one, a woman I've known since our children were in elementary school together, who retired 2 years ago from a career in family law. I called her from my kitchen, and I told her what Finn had found, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "If what he found is accurate, and there's been no divorce filed, the marriage to your son would not be legal. She may be exposing herself to criminal liability as well. Fraud. Potentially more, depending on what she's represented to him financially. What should I do?" She was quiet again. I know that quiet. It means she's being honest with me, even though the honest thing is complicated. "You have to tell him," she said, "before the ceremony. You have to give him the choice. But you have to do it carefully, and you have to do it now. He'll think I'm doing this too." I stopped. It's a thing I'd been afraid of, that he would think I was sabotaging something beautiful because I was grieving, because I was lonely, because I couldn't accept someone new in his life. We'd talked around that. Once, briefly, and he'd been kind, but I'd heard the edge underneath, the small worry that I might be more complicated than he needed me to be. "He might," Vivienne said, "but you'll have proof, and he needs to know." She was right. Of course she was right. I knew it before I called her. My son was at a hotel downtown, the one on Dunlop Street where the wedding party was getting ready. I asked Finn to call him and say there was something that needed 10 minutes. Not an emergency, not an accident, just 10 minutes, and could he come down to the lobby? He came down in his dress shirt with his tie loose and his hair not quite done yet, and he looked so much like his father for a moment that I had to press my hand against my sternum and breathe. "Mom, what's going on?" "Sit down," I said, "and please listen to everything before you say anything." He sat. I told him what Finn had found, what Finn had seen, what the public record showed. I kept my voice level. I had a piece of paper where I'd written down the key information, the address, the name registered to the property, the date of the marriage registration, and I put it on the table between us. I didn't touch him. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. I told myself that this was not about me. He didn't say anything for a long time. "You saw her there this morning," he said finally. Not a question. "Yes." "With him?" "Yes." He looked at the paper. He picked it up. He set it back down. He was very still in the way that he gets sometimes, a stillness I recognize because his father had it too. A drawing in before a decision, the quiet before someone who doesn't make noise when they're angry gets to the other side of it. "She told me she was at the salon," he said. "I know." He stood up. He walked to the window that looked out over the street. Down below there were people having coffee on a patio, living a regular Saturday. He stood there for what felt like a long time. Then he turned around. "I need to talk to her," he said. "Okay. Alone. Of course." He called her from the hotel room while Finn and I waited in the lobby. 22 minutes, by the clock above the front desk. Then he came back downstairs, and his face was very calm and very closed, and he said, "She's coming here." She arrived in her salon clothes. She had, apparently, gone to the appointment after all, which tells you something about her, I think. And she walked through the hotel lobby with her hair done and her chin up, and she didn't look at me. And she didn't look at Finn. She only looked at my son. They went somewhere private. I don't know exactly what was said. I have never asked him, and he has never volunteered it, and I think that is correct. What I know is that the ceremony did not happen. My son came back after 40 minutes, and he told the officiant and the wedding coordinator, and then the two of us helped him make the calls to immediate family before the guests started arriving. It was exhausting and humiliating in the way that only the exposure of a lie can be. That specific shame that belongs to the person who was deceived, but somehow coats everyone nearby. I sat with him in a small room at the back of the venue, and I held his hand while he called his uncle in Sudbury, and his cousin who had flown in from Vancouver, and his work colleague who had driven from Ottawa, and said the same thing over and over. "It's canceled. I'll explain later. I'm okay." He was not okay. But he said it. The guests were redirected before they came inside. The flowers stayed where they were. The cake was already there, which struck me as unbearably sad, those 3 tears on a table in an empty room. I didn't see her again that day. I was told, later, through Vivienne, that the legal situation was referred to the appropriate authorities, and that there were proceedings initiated regarding the fraudulent misrepresentation she had made, not only to my son but in the course of their financial arrangements. She had been listed on his mortgage application as his common law partner for over a year, providing documentation of her status that Vivienne told me was considered material misrepresentation. Whatever she had hoped to accomplish, it had not included the possibility that someone who loved him would be paying attention. I thought about that afterward, about being the person who paid attention. I think sometimes women my age are treated as though our attention is a liability. A smothering thing. I felt my son's discomfort, not often but sometimes, when I asked too many questions or lingered a moment too long on something that worried me. I had learned to hold back. I had learned to let him come to his own conclusions. I had thought that was the right way to love an adult child, with an open hand, with space, without grasping, and I had almost made myself invisible on his wedding morning because I thought that was what a good mother did. I'm glad I got in that car. The weeks after were hard. I won't pretend otherwise. My son went back to work, which is what he does when he doesn't know what else to do. And for a while we talked a little less than usual, and I knew enough to let that be what it needed to be. There's grief in the collapse of something you believed in, even when the thing was a deception. He had loved who he thought she was. That was real. Losing that was real. I couldn't make it small by saying she had never been what he thought she was. He knew that. It didn't make the loss smaller, but by October. He was coming for Sunday dinner again, and in November he called me on a Tuesday evening, just to talk, no reason. just to say he'd been thinking about the year and what he'd learned, and that he thought he was starting to feel like himself again. And in December, on Christmas Eve, he hugged me in the kitchen while the tourtière was in the oven and the snow was falling in the way it does in Barrie sometimes. Sideways, ridiculous, perfect. And he said, "You know I know what that morning cost you." I told him it hadn't cost me anything. He said he knew that wasn't true, but that he appreciated me saying it. He's okay. I want you to know that first and foremost, because that's all I've thought about since last January. Whether he would be okay. He is. He has more paperwork than he expected to have in his 42nd year, and the mortgage situation is complicated. And the calls to Vancouver and Sudbury and Ottawa all had to be made a second time with more information than the first time, and none of that has been easy. But he is okay. And I am okay too. I'm telling you this story not because I did something heroic. I got in a car because a young man I trusted asked me to, and then I told my son the truth, and then I sat with him while he made some very hard phone calls. That is not heroism. That's just being a mother. But I am 63 years old, and I have watched my generation of women apologize for their attention and second-guess their instincts and make themselves smaller so the people they love can feel more free. And I want to say clearly, your attention is not a problem. Your presence is not an imposition. When the person who has known someone the longest and loved them the most notices something, when they sit up in the back of a parked car and see what they see with their own two eyes, that noticing matters. My son is getting on with his life. Finn was the best man at a wedding that didn't happen, and they're still close, which tells you something about both of them. Vivian is still my friend, and she still charges too much for advice, even when she's giving it to me for free, and I tell her so every time we have lunch. And I still have that navy blazer. I hung it back up that evening, straightened and silent, thinking I wouldn't wear it for a while. But I wore it to his hockey alumni dinner in the spring. He plays in the Old Timers League now, which he would prefer I not tell people, but I think it's wonderful. He scored a goal that night, a lucky deflection, he said, though his teammate Finn said otherwise, and afterward in the parking lot under the yellow lights he looked at me across the roof of the car and said, "Good night, Mum," the same way he's said it since he was 12. That's enough. That has always been enough.